everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of The Best You, a coaching podcast. It's Gary here again, and as always, I'd like to thank you very, very much for joining me for this episode. And I hope you're all doing great and very well and investing in whatever work you've committed to get closer to being the best you. So firstly, I'd like to start with a wee bit of a disclaimer as to why I haven't published this particular pod until now. After publishing the last pod around about the May timeframe, late May I believe it was timeframe, I did get very, very busy with my other passion, which is Glasgow Rangers Football Club from back home in Glasgow in Scotland. And for those who don't know, I'm president of an organisation here in North America called the North American Rangers Supporters Association. And each year we host an annual convention, which is a convention, quite honestly, in name only. It's an end of season party, quite frankly. And we typically host it in a very cool city here in North America. This year it was in Toronto, Canada, and it was from June 14th to 17th. And to be dead honest, and I really should know better, but I kind of forgot how time consuming the latter stages of the planning processes and endeavours can be. So if you were waiting on this pod dropping, as they say in the industry, I apologise, as I could and very much should have managed my own and your expectations about what was truly possible and probable in terms of delivery of a pod between May and now. So let's get to why you actually tuned in to the pod in the first place, shall we? So on this show, we're going to follow through the content provided in blog number 5, which is posted on the GaryGillan.com website, which is on the topic of leaving the cycle of transition and how to leave well, and where I discuss the thoughts, emotions and processes involved with leaving an organisation. And I will explain a wee bit more about the rationale behind the topic selection and reasoning behind why I believe that now is an important time to consider the content that we discussed on that particular pod when I get to that. In terms of what you can expect to enjoy in this episode, is going to be a quick overview of what I've been up to, which is essentially what I've been learning since the last pod, and in addition to what I just shared, of course, regarding NARSA. And again, I think this is the third pod in a row. I'll be providing a quick summary, a quick book review, and the book for this episode is again from my archive. And for those who have listened in before, you'll know that that's me just being fancy and saying I've actually already read the book. I already have my notes and my thoughts, particularly related to the book, captured, so I don't have to do a whole bunch of work to bring this to you. And this particular book is called Start With Why: How Great Leaders Inspire Everyone to Take Action, and that's by Simon Sinek. And you know, for this particular book, quite honestly, I can't remember where or when I bought it and what inspired me even in the first place to read it. I'm fairly sure I'd seen Simon on various TED Talks and on maybe other podcasts or YouTube clips or something, and was becoming more and more intrigued by the work he was doing. So I wanted to take a wee bit of a step back and get to a spot where I understood some of his thought leadership and to see if his writing style would jive with my learning style. And I can give you a bit of a sneak peek into that. I can confirm that absolutely it did. Boy, did it ever. I really, really enjoyed it. So just a quick reminder that the spirit behind the book reviews is just to edutain you for the first time if you haven't read the book, or to refresh your memory as to the key messages from the author in this particular book, and just provide my interpretation of what resonated with me as I was reading through it, like the other book reports that I've done in previous pods and will definitely do in the future. This is most certainly not an in-depth critique of all things good and otherwise of the book. I am definitely no literary critic, but I'll simply just provide a wee bit of some of the main highlights and things that struck a chord for me, and how I am already using in my practice some of the key messages from it as well. So, having done a quick search on Simon's website, I see that this was actually the first of 5 books that he's written thus far, and this one was from 2009, and then he followed that up with Leaders Eat Last, Why Some Teams Pull Together and Others Don't, 2013. Then Together Is Better, A Little Book of Inspiration, from 2016. Find Your Why, A Practical Guide for Discovering Purpose for You and Your Team, from 2017. And then The Infinite Game, from 2019. So as we sit here in 2023, he's obviously kind of got himself a wee bit out of the groove of writing, and maybe that means he's working on something else, who knows. But anyway, let's start with the key theme of the book, and that is essentially establishing the importance of your why, which is your whole reason or purpose for doing something, which will be your foundation, your North Star, or essentially, as I say, your whole reason for being or existing, whether it be in your personal life or in your professional life, or both, of course. And if you truly understand your why, it'll be instilled in everything that you do. It'll be easy to communicate to others, and it will be obvious fairly quickly, and dare I say, kind of easily, like when you've split from your why. And that's actually wording and language that he uses in the book when he says split happens, and sometimes you veer away from your why as well. So understanding your why then allows you to establish your what, which is, for example, the products or services that you will produce or you will sell and or give away in some fashion. And your how. So your why will resonate then with your what and your how. And your how is the processes, systems and sequencing of how you would produce your what, if you like. So a wee bit more difficult to know than the what, as in I'm talking about the how right now, but still fairly clear in terms of the linearity of how you get to your what. So, it's the tangible things. The key is to then understand and articulate why you're doing what you're doing. For example, your purpose, your cause, your belief. And Simon says, and I'm going to say that quite a few times through this book report, so we'll get that part out of the way, but why does your company exist? Why did you get out of bed this morning or every morning? And why should someone care, or why should anyone care in that as well? So really getting to the core of why you do what you do, which then leads to what you produce as a result of that, and how you actually get to that production as well. So those are the three key themes of the book. So the book is split into 6 parts, and part 1 is a world that doesn't start with why. Part 2, an alternative perspective. Part 3, leaders need a following. Part 4, how to rally those who believe. Part 5, the biggest challenge is success. And part 6, discover why. So some part headings are quite self-explanatory, and some take a wee bit more kind of teasing in a sort of if you know kind of way. And what I'd like to do is just highlight some of the key lessons and content that I found fairly interesting. So lesson number 1, he calls it inspirational carrots, and there are effectively only 2 ways to influence human behaviour. You can either manipulate human behaviour or you can inspire human behaviour. So when we look at the number of different incentives offered to us as consumers, for example, price drops, short-term promotions, using fear as a trigger, for example, like this is going away soon, you better purchase it soon, or we can't guarantee this price will be here forever. Peer pressure, aspirational messages, etc. They all typically point to some form of manipulation, and by contrast, great leaders, he says, are able to create a following of people who act not because they were manipulated, but simply because they were inspired. And for those who are inspired, the motivation to act becomes deeply personal, and those who are inspired are willing to pay a premium, endure some sort of inconvenience or even personal suffering. For example, if you're queuing for a ticket outside to purchase a ticket for something, if you're queuing for the latest gadget outside the Apple store or something like that, or anyone who has tried to get Harry Styles or Taylor Swift tickets over the last wee while, you'll know exactly what I mean. And if you don't know who either of those are, then contact me directly and I'll explain a wee bit more about that. But don't worry about it, is the key part of that, is what I'd like to share. So Simon says, let's try and forget the manipulative stick and let's stick to the inspirational carrot, and that's the main lesson number 1. Lesson number 2 is 3 little words, and I've talked about them just a wee bit earlier there, and it's the what, the how and the why. And I did explain what each of those were in the wee introduction to the book, and Simon goes further into this by introducing what he calls the golden circle, with why dead in the centre, how in the ring just outside the centre, and then what on the outside ring. And to re-emphasise, if you know your why, like to its absolute core or to its deepest meaning, the how you do things to get to the what is produced naturally, and that will naturally flow or follow from there as well. And the example that he provided in this particular lesson, and it's referenced fairly frequently throughout the book as well, and I mentioned it just briefly there earlier, is Apple, the company Apple. And the example of Apple's why, and just a wee quick reminder on this book was written in 2009, so as we sit here in 2023, some time has passed, of course. But what he says is that Apple's why would be everything we do, we believe is in challenging the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we challenge the status quo is by making our products beautifully designed, simple to use, and user-friendly. Want to buy one? That's what he writes in there. So it has somehow in there, it has somewhat in there, and then it has a call to action at the end. But it starts with, this is why we're doing this. People don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. Lesson number 3 is defuzzing why. So if a customer feels inspired to buy a product, rather than feeling manipulated, they'll be able to verbalise the reasons why they think what they bought is a better solution or better for them than any alternatives that exist out there. So in reality, their purchase decision and their loyalty are deeply personal. I mentioned that a wee while ago. So what should you or a company do? Instead of asking what should we do to compete, the questions must be asked of why did we start doing what we're doing in the first place, and what can we do to bring our cause or that cause to life. Now this is going to mean different things to different people or different organisations, but if you just take a moment just now to think about why you do what you do, whatever it is that you do, and why your company does what it does, I should pose a question here. Is it obvious to you? Is it easy to articulate both on the personal and professional side? At this point, I think it's good to point out, if you were considering your why, not to be swayed by incentives or outcomes. For example, if someone says, well, why are you asking me that? The reason I'm doing that is to make lots of money. That's not a why. That talks to an incentivized output, but just not the why you're doing what you're doing in the first place. It's a very thought-provoking book. It doesn't give you a whole bunch of, if I could say what's, this is how you do it, but it gives you a whole bunch of ideas and thoughts to consider as you move forward. Lesson 4, followers choose to follow. So the example shared here, he talks about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s 1963 I Have a Dream speech, and the reasoning and rationale behind why so many people showed up to see that speech. And Simon explains that they showed up not for him per se, but for themselves. And the reason was that Dr. King had clearly identified a why that others then assumed and took up as their own, and a why that included a vision, values, and belief that matched their own. So Dr. King offered, America a place to go, not the actual plan to follow, but the place where they wanted to end up. And he also described the leadership of Ernest Shackleton, who was a renowned and an inspirational leader who had failed in his mission to get to the South Pole. And the reason is that Shackleton demonstrated similar skills to Dr. King. In fact, when Shackleton appealed for a crew to join him on his fateful expedition, he didn't define a list of desired skills. He identified a why of his own and sought followers to come along and join him on the why. And the advertisement for his expedition read, "Men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful, honour and recognition in case of success." Wow. And Shackleton hired only people who believed what he believed, because when people believe, they belong. And in business, when people belong, they will guarantee or at least significantly increase your chance of success as well. So I love it when authors provide tactical, practical stories that we can relate to, that we can do our own research on afterwards, and we can make our mind up about at the same time. Lesson number 5 is followers need to belong, and it's not just all about the leader, of course, and actually far from it. A human being's need to belong isn't rational, but it's a constant that exists across all people in all cultures. It's a feeling that we get when those around us share our values and our beliefs, and when when we feel like we belong, and think about this for yourself, we feel connected, we feel safe, and as humans, we crave that feeling, and we do seek it out. So no matter where we go, we then trust those with whom we share common values and common beliefs. I get this with my football team, Rangers, that I mentioned earlier, and I experience it during my project management endeavours when we're all rowing in the same direction on a project delivery. So consider where you feel like you truly belong, whether it be to a local community, to a church, to a health or fitness movement, to a fraternity of sorts. The desire to belong and the positive benefits that you gain from such belonging can be literally life-changing and definitely incredible. So Cynic then also states that our natural need to belong also makes us good at spotting things that don't belong. So it's a sense that we get, a feeling and something deep inside us, and something that we can't quite put into words, but what it does do is it allows us to feel how some things just fit and some things just don't, and then we become drawn to leaders and organisations that make us feel like we belong, and then to make us feel special and safe and not alone, and as part of what gives them the ability to inspire us as well. Real good food for thought there. And the sixth lesson is verbalising your values. So once you know why you do what you do, the question becomes how will you do it? And beginning with this particular question will help. What are the values or principles that will guide how to bring your cause to life? So I'll say that again. What are the values or principles that will guide how to bring your cause to life? How do we do things? And more importantly, have the discipline to hold our organisation and our employees accountable to the chosen guiding principles enhances our ability, of course, and your ability to work to our natural strengths and make things feel easier. But humans, unfortunately, we don't make this easy on ourselves. If you think back to the core values pod that I did back in May there, once you get to your core values, it can be quite a difficult endeavour to take them as read and then hold ourselves to account based on the words or phrases that you've listed. So there has to be a way to verbalise the values, to understand how it connects to your why, to your how, to your what, and then you hopefully achieve some semblance of balance, and with that balance you then have a better chance of genuinely being authentic, which brings a greater feeling of fulfilment, both in you and your customers. And I'll say customers in air quotes for that, but it depends what product, service or result that you're trying to promote. So then in summary, Simon writes, a company is a culture. A group of people brought together around a common set of values and beliefs. It's not products or services that bind a company together. When people inside the company know why they come to work, people outside the company are more likely to understand why the company is special. Great organisations become great because the people inside the organisation feel protected. The strong sense of culture creates a sense of belonging and acts like a safety net. People come to work knowing that their bosses, colleagues and the organisation as a whole will look out for them. This results in reciprocal behaviour. So there are some other great quotes in the book here, and I'm just going to read them out if you don't mind. The role of a leader is not to come up with all of the great ideas. The role of a leader is to create an environment in which great ideas can happen. The role of a leader is to be charismatic and inspirational, because while energy excites, charisma inspires. Charisma is hard to define, near impossible to measure and too elusive to copy. Charisma comes from a clarity of why. I love that. I really love that last part. And great leaders start from why. Have an inspirational story to tell, bring others who share their belief together, and through how and what help individuals fulfill their own whys. So there you have it. That's what I've been up to, and that's I hope that this book report for Simon Sinek's Start With Why covers all the facets of life and emphasises at the most basic rudimentary level the most important question that you can ask yourself is why we do what we do, why we behave like we behave, and why are we motivated by what we are motivated by, and so on. You get the gist there. And it all starts with the question of why. So if you haven't read the book yet, I would suggest that you go pick yourself up a copy or download a copy, depending on your reading preferences. It is a quick and enjoyable read. I made a wee bit of a meal of it towards the end, and I just couldn't quite get myself over the final hurdle to finish it, which also resulted in a wee bit of a delay. But it really is genuinely, if you concentrate time and effort on it, a quick and enjoyable read, and it does reinforce the need to understand the why before you build in or around a thought or an idea or a strategy or some other progressive process. And at the end he says, if this book inspired you, please pass it on to someone you want to inspire. So I am doing that very thing. I have actually done my job in that respect on this podcast, and I will move on from there. Hopefully that was valuable for you. So in terms of what I've been up to since we last chatted, apart from, of course, writing book reports, I did do a wee bit more work on the GaryGillen.com website. Of course, posted blog number 5 on leaving, which I'll talk about in a wee while here. I'm still continuing to work through the curriculum work for my Positive Intelligence Operating System qualification that I'm pursuing, but I have to admit I've given myself a wee bit of forgiveness for falling a wee bit behind on that as my Rangers work kicked into gear. So it's on my list of development work to catch up on over the summer, and that's most certainly what my target is for right now. In terms of books on the go, the main one that I picked up, predominantly picked up, I tinkered with it a wee bit a couple of months back, is now John Maxwell's The 16 Undeniable Laws of Communication. I most likely won't have a book report for that for next time, because I've just finished law number 1 and there are 15 laws to go. But communications is actually going to be the theme of the next blog, and it's going to be the theme of the next podcast. So it will be a good segue into some of the key topics and themes that I want to talk about on communications, and then hopefully that will be kind of backed up or enhanced in some way when I get to the book report on the undeniable laws of communication. It'll actually give me an opportunity to see how far off I maybe was or will be on some of the laws. And of course, these are just John's laws, not actual laws. So we'll see how that goes. Other than that, I have been working full time as a project manager. Of course, that's my day job, and a part-time coach here in Calgary, and everything is going well. And having said that, the way that things are going right now, it's looking likely that I will be leaving my current organisation a tad earlier than both myself and the organisation were anticipating. So the theme of this pod is kind of somewhat timely, as you know, for me definitely, and hopefully as much as it is for you as well. So if this is a recurring theme where I'm going to have a topic and then that thing is actually going to happen to me, maybe the topic of the next pod isn't going to be communication. It's going to be how to adjust to instantaneous millionaire status after a gigantic lottery win. Maybe I should do that if there's some sort of prophecy related to my topics. Maybe, you never know, fingers crossed. So on to the actual content for this year. So just to embellish and just enhance a wee bit of the blog content, which, as I mentioned earlier, is called Leaving and the Cycle of Transition and How to Leave Well. I'm going to again start with a wee bit of background on this one. And, you know, essentially people leave things all the time. I myself personally have left employers, I have left organisations, I have left sporting interests, I've left relationships, both personal and professional, and I've even left countries, or a country, and I can't say with any degree, quite honestly, of confidence that I've done it consistently and spectacularly well every single time, and being really genuinely open here, far from it, on one or two occasions as well. So I wanted to delve a wee bit deeper and analyse my experiences thus far. And as I said in the blog, I've been in the workforce for a long time, 30 plus years in my career thus far, and I've spanned multiple industries in a couple of different countries, a couple of different continents for that matter as well, and during that time I have accumulated a reasonable amount of experience in leaving organisations myself and seeing other people leaving organisations. And in my earlier career, I honestly didn't place that much importance on the parameters, optics, processes, emotional impact, required investment, and how to do it properly to make the experience of leaving appropriate and as easy in all parties concerned. Now, don't misunderstand me, don't get me wrong, I followed the rules every single time. I didn't mic drop or just disappear or anything like that. And I would like to think that I did the absolute best that I could based on where I was in my life and my career at that particular time, leading to leaving on a positive note each time. And I can put my hand on my heart and say that I think I did that. It's mostly now that I do have this body of experiential data, information, to look back on, that I can truly reflect on how important it is to get it right and the implications of getting it wrong and the surrounding factors that could and should be considered when you're building into the process of leaving whatever it is you're leaving. So then I started to ask myself, why is this a difficult thing to do? And why have I seen it performed spectacularly poorly on many occasions and spectacularly well on much less occasions? So it's a question I ponder. It's a question I will continue to ponder, no doubt, until the end of my career. But firstly, let's just talk about the various reasons that I detailed in terms of why people would leave. One of them would be you've outgrown your existing position and you need to move elsewhere, internal or external to your organisation, to fulfil your career needs. Circumstances might have developed where your enjoyment or fulfilment from your existing role has materially changed, mostly not for the better, and for the sake of your own mental fitness, that you'd rather be elsewhere. Changing organisational or industry conditions have come into play, making the exit door seem a wee bit more strategically palatable rather than sticking around for whatever changes are around the corner. The company you're working with right now, their values no longer align with your own core values. That could happen. Leadership and or team changes have impacted the culture, the atmosphere, the tone, or any other parameters that are meaningful and important to you in your existing role. Personal circumstances might have emerged that dictate that a life change is required. For example, you're retiring. Your health issues have become a factor. There's some sort of physical limitations that are impacting your ability to fulfill your role. It's some stuff like that. That's personal circumstances are just a factor now than maybe they weren't before, or an urgent need has emerged in another area in the organisation that requires an immediate response, leading to a secondment of some sort or some sort of arrangement like that, or. And this is the worst case scenario, of course, you are invited to leave, which is a very polite and pleasant way of saying you have been let go from the organisation due to downsizing, due to redundancies, due to changing organisational strategies, or some other factors that have come into play. Some may be of a more personal or a more performance-based nature. We don't know that at this particular point. Now, I want to, and I did emphasise this in the pod, I want to acknowledge one very, very important point, that in my experience, and it took me a while, quite honestly, to understand what that kind of nagging, gnawing annoyance was to me, and I subsequently realised that leaving is awkward, and despite every effort that you may have made or put into preparing for leaving, including readying yourself for a variety of reactions or responses, sometimes things just don't go as smoothly as we would like or feel as good or positive as we had hoped. People will react. There will be pendulum reactions that could be present, which will take time and effort to navigate. And a lot of this is outside of your control. Very, very little of it, in fact, is inside your control. But preparing yourself for as many realistic reactions and outcomes is most certainly a solid plan to ensure that you avoid getting too bogged down in negativity or any bad behaviour. People will take things personally and make it about them when you're leaving, and despite your best efforts to say this is not about you, this is about me, and any of the other rationale and explanations that you will provide, some people will take a bit more time to actually get there, to hear the words, to understand and appreciate and believe, quite frankly, what it is you're leaving for. Now, I want to acknowledge that there is absolutely nothing wrong to feeling awkward. And it's perfectly normal to feel actually any emotion that you experience throughout the leaving the process. Awkward is the word I use. It might be something else for you. It might be weird. It might be disappointed. It might feel like you're letting people down. You might feel sad. You might feel whatever it is. 100% perfectly normal for you. So much of the process, as I've said, is outside your control anyway, leading to things that simply just don't go, as good as you hoped, and that's all right. So this is a wee bit of a plug for the pendulum reactions part that I mentioned a wee bit earlier there, and that was pod number 2. If you haven't listened to it before, if you go there and understand the pendulum reactions, these mighty swings that people will go from being your best friend, receiving the resignation letter, and then feeling like you're your worst enemy. So there could be some, let's just say, funky behaviour around that as well. Many people smarter than me have explained that emotions contain data. So irrespective of your reasons for leaving, there can and will be a range of thoughts and feelings associated with the pending change. And to be very clear, it is a change. So appreciating that when some sort of change is introduced, you're going to gain something and you're going to give something up. So you can use all of the data that you've collected about how you react, about how you've seen the reactions to other people leaving, about how you know that your leadership reacts under pressure or to emergent news. Whatever data you can collect, including the emotions, as I say, that you would be feeling, then you can use that to your benefit, and you can use that to garner what your plan is and give each area the right type and style of attention as well. So as you build into your decision to leave, you're going to have some supplementary thoughts and emotions that will present themselves, and they can weigh heavy on your heart and on your head, and whether it's going to be the effect of the solid friendships or colleagueships that you've built up with your colleagues, with the vendors, with the customers, with whomever it is that you're leaving behind, or even simply the life events that have occurred during your tenure. You join an organisation unmarried and you leave married with a family, or any poignant vacations that you've taken during that time, some births, some deaths, whatever it's been. There's a lot that goes with it's not just the actual employment, it's the life experience that you've managed to amass during that time as well. So what you do with that data is going to determine how much you allow yourself to experience and enjoy, quite honestly, the process of leaving. The good news is that this is very, very valuable information to have, and as early as possible in the process, it will allow you to acknowledge what you're feeling and then use that information to predict what the future could possibly hold. So some common emotions that you may experience working through the leaving process. You could be excited. You could have the opportunity to pursue something new, or new paths, or what has been a lifelong passion or dream of yours. It could be relief if you've been having an unhappy time in your existing employment, and leaving can bring that sense of relief that you don't have to put up with those thoughts, feelings, conditions and emotions as you move forward. Nervousness, of course, the unknown, the change can cause anxiety. Are you going to fit in the new place? Are your new colleagues going to really be as good as your old colleagues, or supplement your new role? Is the new role going to be as good as you think it's going to be, or as much as you hope it's going to benefit you as you move forward? All those things can create nerves, of course. You might be sad. You might be sad at leaving the place where you've spent a significant amount of time, where you've accomplished something amazing there, and that could project some sort of sad emotional reaction as well. And you could feel guilty. And I think when I said earlier the awkwardness, part of the awkwardness for me, there's a tinge of guilt in it for me as well, just about leaving the organisation, about leaving the colleagues, and perhaps possibly leaving some unfinished work as well. And again, I just want to re-emphasise here, whatever you're feeling at any point in this journey is absolutely normal for you at that given point in time. And it's also important to recognise that nothing lasts forever. Everyone is going to move on at some point. And it's your right, your absolute right, to do what's best for you. And this isn't me trying to give you a positive self-talk or any sort of speech to make you feel better in any way. it's just a fact. People will leave the organization. Even the founder will leave eventually, even if it's on her or his deathbed. So getting used to the fact that leaving is normal will hopefully help alleviate any heavy emotions that you might feel as a result of that. So I also included in the blog 5 tips to leaving well. So as we established, leaving an organisation can be typically as a significant decision, and as such it's important to do it as thoughtfully, methodically and professionally as is possible under the current circumstances, to ensure that you leave on as good a terms as you possibly can and maintain the positive relationships that you'd like to maintain with your former organisation and your former colleagues as well. Giving your soon-to-be ex-colleagues a piece of your mind as you're leaving, or giving them the middle finger on the way out the door, or mic dropping or whatever, as I mentioned earlier there, it doesn't, quite frankly folks, it doesn't even serve you in the moment. There's no instantaneous relief or aha moment or enjoyment that comes from that, and of course it could lead to serious potential consequences for you at some time down the road. Hence the need to plan thoughtfully and carefully about how you're actually going to follow the process. And there are several important parameters to consider when leaving an organisation. Most are dictated by the organisational processes and policies and the contract that you may have signed in terms of your employment contract or the contract to provide goods or services. And some are going to be born from your own core values, your own wants, your own needs, your own desires for how you want this to play out. And I wanted just to talk through 5 tips that I consider to be very important for the process of leaving. The first one, always be professional. When you're resigning, it's extremely important to be professional at all times. Consider how you would like one of your employees or someone who works and reports to you to resign. This could be a solid reference point for you for how you want to behave in the future. No smugness, no throwing the resignation letter across the desk or anything like that. Behave like how you would like people to behave with you. Give adequate notice. Ensure that you give the required notice for your company's policy, and possibly, depending on your role in the organisation and the relationships that you've built, it may be possible to provide a wee bit more notice to give people as much time to prepare for what the future looks like without you. I had an opportunity to do that when I was leaving Scotland to move to Canada. I had a 4-week notice period in my contract of employment, which was fairly typical in the industry that I was in, and I ended up giving, what would that be, August, September, I gave 3.5 months notice. I told them in early to mid-July, and I left at the end of October, and it felt great because I had an opportunity to finish well, which was my main concern at that particular point. Offer to help with the transition. Let the organisation know that you're genuinely willing to help with the transition to a new team member. And some organisations I've left, I create a summary sheet with the required information that I would appreciate if I was walking into the role. This is where this thing is at. This is the importance. These are the key stakeholders. This is where you can find the files, and there's a hyperlink to a SharePoint site or a Teams site, wherever the information resides. And it's just a little bit of a 1-pager or a 2-pager of a how-to, as I say, things that I would have appreciated if I was walking in to the role. Then the fourth part would be managing expectations, and that's kind of broken out into 2. The first one would be complete the work that you said you were going to complete. Bring to a logical conclusion any outstanding work and tie up as many loose ends as you can before you leave. And if you can't, and here's the kicker, clearly explain that and with as much advance notice as possible, and telling them why. You overcommitted, things took longer than you expected, the other parameters came into play that you weren't anticipating or expecting at that particular time. But do as much as you possibly can to complete the work that you said you would complete during your notice period. And to that point, don't overpromise. Be realistic about what you can and can't achieve prior to leaving. And an intent on leaving shouldn't be to then give yourself a whole bunch more burden and then manifest itself into you putting in a massive superhuman effort, working all the hours under the sun and exhausting yourself in your final weeks or days. And I can tell you, I know this from direct experience, because many times I've left an organisation and I've been the last one, literally the last one to leave the office on my last day. Now, this would not be if we're going for drinks or anything like that, but that might be at another time. But literally, I've been the last person there, and I've left my ID, and I've walked out the door, I've set the alarm, I've walked out the door and left, and I've thought, wait a minute, like, there's supposed to be some benefits from leaving, and surely that would be just me walking out the door guilt-free before the end of the day. And I did that because I did want to manage expectations. I wanted to leave on a very solid note. I wanted to complete what I said I would complete, and I wanted to fulfill the promises that I had given as well. So don't be that person that's there very, very late on your last day. Manage the expectations of the organisation or person that you're leaving, and of with yourself as well, of course. And then the final one would be say goodbye in whatever format that's appropriate. You can take time, you really should take time to say goodbye to your colleagues and thank them for the support during your time at the organisation. And be specific as much as you possibly can in your thanks and your praise, and try not to use it as an opportunity to settle scores or say anything disparaging or anything like that. Just say goodbye, and it can be done in a variety of ways and in a variety of interactions as well. Some of it could be personal, with a handshake or an elbow bump or a casual nod of the head. Some of it could be over the phone, some of it could be via email, or whatever the best and most appropriate medium would be for you to be able to get everyone you want to get to say goodbye to. But it's important just to give yourself that delineation to say, okay, I have said it, my out of office is on. If you work in an office setting, I have done as much as I possibly can do. I've given some personal details for people that want to keep in touch, and then I will move on from there. And then from a transitioning perspective, a key area involved in leaving an organisation will be how well you transition out of your existing role. Now, there are a variety of ways to transition. I've mentioned a couple of times now mic dropping and sprinting in the opposite direction, maybe working to rule, maybe sabotaging the organisation, downing tools, through to then creating a collaborative and methodical transition plan to assist in executing the said plan. Here's a thing to consider. At some point in your career, you will likely be in a position of taking over a role that someone else has occupied. And if you have done that, take a moment to consider this and what impact it had on you, or what impact it would have on the other person in your role. So if you went into a role and there was no transition plan, the file structure was a mess, there was no semblance of understanding of what your first day, your second day, your third day should look like, think about how you felt at that particular point. Did it feel good? Did it feel supportive? Did it feel progressive? Think about that in terms of a pay it forward type situation. So what, if any, steps did your predecessor take to make sure you were set up for success? How would you have managed things differently had you been the person vacating the role? And if you found yourself spending a lot of time thinking about what did or did not get transitioned, rather than concentrating on what your actual role was, that's information and data in and of itself in terms of how well or not the transition actually was handled. So if you had a positive experience when transitioning, congratulations, that's great, and thank you to whomever set the scene for you to have that good and positive experience. Conversely, if you had a stink bomb of an experience when taking over a position, then you need to try and do what you can do to ensure that that doesn't happen to whomever will assume your role at some point in the future. So building into consistently considering and planning for what life will look like when you eventually move on. So if it were to happen a little bit quicker than normal, for whatever reason, that you then don't get completely caught unprepared. And I like to call this the cycle of transition. Thinking of it as a cycle, it helps me appreciate that it doesn't really start or end. You'll take over a role, and at some point someone will take over your role or parts of your role. So with it, with your role then being considered somewhat transient or somewhat temporary, or looking at it from a temporary lens, you can then start to appreciate and build into more forward thinking and a desired end state for your tenure within that particular role as well. I personally don't think there are any downsides to considering this that I can see at all. It's not planning for any sort of sinister behaviour in the future. It's not one eye out the door. It's just preparing for what eventuality will come upon you, essentially. Not that I likely need to tell you this, but there are some tangible benefits of leaving an organisation well. Increased positive reputation for yourself, a strong professional reference should you need it at some point down the line, expanded career prospects in the future as a result of the first couple. Relationships will be preserved, maintained, or enhanced, and quite honestly, it just feels good to leave, in a positive way. And on the flip side, some negative connotations of leaving badly could include damage to your reputation, zero or somewhat misrepresented professional references, limited career prospects in the future with the people that were impacted by you leaving on a poor note, broken relationships or burnt bridges, to use that phrase, potential legal action if you do it in a way that wasn't in keeping with your contracted conditions. And it just doesn't feel as good, in the moment and most likely when you get a chance to reflect afterwards. So whatever way you transition in or out of an organisation, or however that is handled, it will be your attitude and your approach to it that's going to ultimately determine the success, and the success for you and your successor as well. You don't want to be bogged down by the past, and you definitely do want to hit the ground running as quickly as you possibly can in your new role as well. So consider how you could help facilitate that for your successors, is advice I'd like to just give to you at this particular point. Okay, so I hope from this episode that you'll agree that leaving and transitioning are things that aren't performed as consistently well as they could and should be. And they're very much topics that could and should be carefully planned into your current role. People are leaving and transitioning in and out of roles every single day, and it would be wise to consider the circumstances, logistics and parameters around that a little bit more proactively, as I said earlier, so as to give yourself and whoever's affected by the transition as smooth of an experience as possible, and give yourself peace of mind as well. These things don't need to be left to chance, folks, and I hope today's content will have you even just a tiny bit more mindful and purposeful and prepared in this area, and I know for a fact that I certainly will be as we go forward. Okay, so I hope this episode of the Best You, a Coaching Podcast, was a valuable use of your time, and that you will join me for more as we move forward together. If you did find it valuable, please do share it with whomever you think would enjoy it, as we continue to try and build a community of like-minded folks from around the globe to help us continue to work towards being the absolute best that we can be. Don't forget to take a peek at garygillen.com for more content and more information, including the previous blogs and previous pods. And until next time, my friends, please do take care of yourself, and all the very best. Okay, cheerio.